systems admin, but then DevOps became a big deal, and I'm glad I stepped into it. Today's talk is going to be a very generic talk about where does everything come together. Of course, after Nathan's talk, I don't think it's too much relevant now, because he really covered everything that I was about to say. So when we look at a typical scenario where a team is developing and deploying, this is something that happens in an iteration. Like we iterate over coding, building, deploying to our CI where we have we have automated testing. Then if that passes, then we go to the QA environment where the QAs will do their manual testing. And then finally, when the QA gives a thumbs up, we go ahead and deploy into production. All that includes archiving the artifacts, keeping them for a rollback. All that is all tools and technology. So when we start with a project, it's essentially one project is just a sales pitch where you get the project and you're getting a lot of money in your company. But how do you really staff a project? You can't have all the devs in the project, or you can't just have QAs in the project. So it has to be a good mix of devs, QAs, BAs, and the secret sauce that we call DevOps, which of course is not a person, that has been discussed yesterday. The first bit that we add to a project are developers. Okay. So why do we consider considering that developers are like golf balls that we fit into the mayonnaise jar, why do we consider developers as the golf balls? Is because they are the biggest part in the project. If we didn't have developers, there will be no coding on the project. So the BA alone cannot just gather requirements and develop something. So what does a developer really do? So everyone understands that they are the backbone of the project, and it's the code that they develop is what we really deploy. And when we look at developers, if we didn't have anybody coding, we would have nothing to showcase. We would have nothing to release. The devs convert client requirements into a product. They write a basic level of testing, basically just testing their own code, which we call the unit tests. And that will be the first level of automated testing. And they also add features, they add toggles, basically whatever there is to do in a project. And thus the analogy is with golf balls, because they form the biggest chunk in a team. So what happens next? Now, one would really feel that the project, if in literal terms, the mayonnaise jar is full with golf balls. What else can fit into it? Of course, no more golf balls can fit into it, because we can only have as many devs as much as work you have on the project. So the next bit is the little pebbles that we add to the project. These pebbles are our BAs. So in an essentially a DevOps compliant project team, you would have one business analyst for about 2 to 3 dev pairs, and they would be fishing out stories to those dev pairs so that nobody's sitting idle and doing nothing on the project. So what does a business analyst really do? The idea of a business analyst is to liaison with the customer, get the requirements back, and convert them into stories, convert them into small chunks of work that the developer can really do. And that's why we call them pebbles, because they fit very well in the gaps that we have where the devs, between the devs. Also, BA, it's the primary link between a dev and a client requirement. Although devs always have the freedom to contact the client at any point of time in an agile environment, but the real bit that comes in, the inceptions, the iteration plannings, the project management is mostly handled by the BAs, because the devs would want to focus their entire time in coding, and they would want to focus their entire time in optimizing what they're coding. So more often than not, devs do not want to focus in liaisoning with customers. Customers can be based out of different time zones, and they would not really have the time to code the entire day, sit up at night, talk to the customer, get back to it, code it again. Plus, the business analysts also create a link between the entire team and the client, creating showcases where the client can view what has been developed, and the client can give in the feedback or tell them if they require anything more, or if the devs are missing something. There are times when you have technical architects on the client side, and there are times when they want to, there are certain requirements that the technical architects feel that they should follow, that the devs should follow. So all that is sort of, you can say, arranged for, or the medium is a business analyst in that. Now when we shake it up all together, we feel that there are BAs, there are the devs. So what else do we need? Do we really feel it's full, the project is done? The BAs are getting requirements from the client, they're setting up showcases, they're doing their IPMs. The devs are developing, they're writing their unit tests. So, you know, we feel that, yeah, it's about it. I think the project is done. We'll be able to figure out everything. But what happens if you have bugs in your code? Like, every code that a developer writes is not as awesome as they think that it is. So the next bit comes is the nosy ones. It's the sand that comes in the project, and basically they scrub the project to a shiny, they scrub the code to a shiny quality, and these are the testers, these are the QAs. This is exactly the kind of happiness that the dev feels when the QA signs it off. No matter how much the dev might feel that my code is awesome, I've written everything according to the acceptance criteria, there just can't be anything possible that goes wrong. But what the QA really does is, apart from just the code base, the QA would deploy it onto a QA environment, and if there are any issues with the environment and, or you can say the hardware, the infrastructure and the code, the QA is the one that will actually figure it out if it passes through the automated testing, which is just the unit test. Plus the QAs enable, the QAs write down functional tests, which is essentially just automating the whole flow of how the application would behave under different scenarios. And all this, even if a dev covers everything in the acceptance criteria, there is potential risk of bugs, and not having those bugs go into the production environment is very, very important, because basically it'll ruin your reputation if you have too many bugs. The client would feel that you're not paying attention to what the client wants. The other thing that the QAs also do is they conduct things called sort of meeting called a bug bash, where the same devs who've written the code would now, the application will be deployed to maybe just a local host or a small server, and you can launch the application off it, and the same devs will test the environment as users. And this is the point of time where devs actually become the end users and figure out whether whatever they've written, is it actually appealing or not? Is it behaving the way it should? Is it slow? Is it fast? Am I getting the right kind of behavior? Is my UI screwed up? Is my UX looking good or not? Would I be happy using this website? And that is when the devs would probably understand how the QA works, why the QA is as nosy as they feel he is. Now, when we look at the project, we feel, you know, we have quality assurance, we have business analysts, and we have our devs building the code. So essentially the application is, you know, we can have the application in a fairly decent place where all these three people can work together and get the application into a deployment mode. Now what happens next? The next bit is deploying the app into production. Can we, so do we really look at this happening manually? If you're in an environment where you're fixing the application, you're deploying you're committing continuously, wouldn't you want to see the effect of all those commits in your end product? So how will that happen? Who does that, or whose responsibility is it? Generally there is a conflict. The devs say that, you know, we've written the code, it's not my responsibility. The QAs will say, I have nothing to do with deployment. The BAs will say, dude, I wouldn't code, right? I'm more into the client setup. So what happens when you're at this place? Who knows which button to push, how to deploy? This is where DevOps comes in. DevOps is the actual secret sauce that really fills in your project. So there was a talk yesterday about what DevOps really is. So when you say DevOps, and you have a lot of job posting where people say, you know, they need a DevOps engineer. So essentially, there is nothing like a DevOps engineer. There's nothing like a DevOps role. It's more of a culture change, like Nathan said. It's more of a movement which focuses on getting development and operations working together. It focuses on, basically it's a concept where anybody who is interested in following these or learning upon these methods and having them implemented in their projects can take up the role of, you know, it's more like a theory. You read up on it, and whatever you feel, or whatever you feel is the best suited and optimized way of having your project get deployed right from the development phase is what DevOps really is. It's basically having the knowledge of development get into the operations bit and picking up the knowledge of operations in the development part. The developers need to be aware of what operations does to actually figure out if the application goes wrong in production and it has passed all our other environments, what really could go wrong. It could be an infrastructure issue, it could be a versioning issue, it could be a memory issue, anything. But unless a dev understands that it's not just about writing codes and getting it tested and having the build green, that is when they feel, that is when they will get the operations knowledge. Now, when we look into the operations bit, usually there is a conflict that the devs say, I've given the code, the operations team is deploying it, they must have messed it up if the build is failing. Because, so, and there is this conflict with the devs where they feel that if it's working on my local environment, it better work in the production environment. That's not true, because your local environment is probably a Linux high-end box, you have your Mac OS X where you have 8 gigs of RAM running, you have SSDs running. That's not what you'll have in production. You won't have SSDs in production. You may not have as much memory that you're using. Devs tend to tweak a lot on their machines. They tend to use aliases. They tend to set up their JVM properties on based on what they feel is best. There is also this little bit where devs feel that, you know, when I run functional tests in my environment, they are faster, but I get slower feedback on the CI environment. So they need to be aware of how environments behave apart from their local environment. So there are a lot of environments outside. There is more to just there is more to environments than their laptops. And similarly, on the operations side, the operations people need to figure out that if there is something in the code that is messing with the infrastructure, they should be able to figure that out. They should be able, even if it has to be implemented by the dev, the first bit of troubleshooting should come from the operations team, or just have nothing like a development and operations team. Have all of them as devs who understand the environment, who understand infrastructure, and all of them can write code. All of them can code the infrastructure, all of them can code the application, and you keep rotating between the roles. This will build the capability of everyone to work in each role that they're working. And essentially that is DevOps. You cannot have segregated roles, because that would lead to conflict, and you would still feel that, you know, it's not my fault. It's not about somebody's fault. It's just about getting the whole picture together so that the client feels that, you know, it's an integrated team, and this is how it should really be delivered. Now, what comes under DevOps is you have a lot of tools, you have a lot of practices, you have infrastructure, you have provisioning, automation, and you have things like Chef, you have Puppet, where it just makes your life easier. Because earlier, why we had a segregation was because we used to do everything manually, you know. So you need a separate team to handle everything manually. There would be a billion documents about how this node is created, how this node setting is done, and then someone would go into the node, do some tweak in the bash RC, or maybe, you know, set up some sudo rights and forget to change the document. Then what do you do? The maintainability now depends on the code, because the moment you change the code, the infrastructure will change, and that is documented on its own in your GitHub. So the idea is to use all the tools that we have, all the technology that we have together to actually come to a point where your entire environment would be such that everybody knows what the other person is doing and everybody can troubleshoot it. There isn't a dependency that the ops team is on leave. Oh, so the guy who did it is on leave, we don't know what he did manually. So that point should never come in a project, because that will lead to delay in fixing, maybe releasing hotfixes, or delay in getting back to the client, or maybe missing your SLAs altogether. The other thing was about creating multiple environments. So what used to happen earlier was you develop a code. In the waterfall model, essentially was to develop a code, you test it, then there's a QA team that will test and everything, and then you will finally, you know, give the war to the client, and the client decides whether they want to deploy it manually or not. But now what happens is you take up the responsibility from the client, you make the client's life easier, and this is where they feel you add the extra bit to them, where you say that, you know, we'll handle your environments, we'll figure out the most optimum way for your application to work, and if there are any changes that you want in that we'll incorporate it, and the code is basically the documentation that you need. So that extra bit where the client has to get back to the devs and ask, you know, this is your application, what do you feel the environment should be like? Or this is what I have, I don't know, you know, I can't give you more than this is my budgetary requirements. All this is taken up by the devs. That's when they will actually feel, by devs I mean the devs, QAs, you can mix up the roles. So basically all this is taken up by the team, and they actually feel the requirement of tweaking the code base, tweaking the test, tweaking the environments in a way that everything works together in the most optimized way. And nobody blames anybody else. It's about working together, and it's about bringing that change in your total, you can say, project team setup. Now, when we talk about Agile, we have multiple iterations. you have features that travel through iterations, then you have concepts like feature toggles have been introduced now, concepts like feature branching have been introduced. All this you can say is a part of the culture that we are going into, and there's a big tag to that culture which is called DevOps. Basically, apart from being a buzzword, it is mostly changing the mindsets of people to work together rather than, you know, blame it, or rather than having pagers on people that only this team will handle level 1 problems, this team will handle level 2 problems, or if it goes beyond only, then the dev will be called in. It shouldn't be that way. Any hotfixes that need to be released, the team should have the capability to release hotfixes. The entire team should have the capability to fix the infrastructure as and when they want it. The other bit is then there are a lot of reading resources that you can use. Basically, what the DevOps culture would do is it improves the reliability and the security of the code base. The entire team becomes responsible for everything from requirement gathering to the deployment, and they become responsible for making the deployment cycles faster. They become responsible for making development faster. They become responsible for making testing faster and having fast feedback on whatever you are building. The ideal scenario would be that every commit that you do, every commit that passes through the automated testing suite should be, and the manual testing suite should be deployed into production. No one should have to wait that this will be my final build number, and then this is what I'll convey to the client, and this is my build number I should deploy. Everything should go into production, and that is where that confidence will come that DevOps as a culture has come into the team. There might be goof ups initially, there might be bugs initially, but as and when you work on it, the entire iteration process works on it, the whole team will gain more confidence, and they would feel more responsible, and they would share that knowledge with the other teams and have them implemented. So the idea is to basically have more information and more transparency about the hardware and software basically built in together in a sort of a DevOps environment. That's about it. Thanks. If there are any questions, then they're most welcome.
What are the tools that you use in your DevOps environment?
So, when we start working on a project, the idea is to first automate the CI environment, because essentially that's the first environment that has to come in. So we use configuration management tools like Chef or Puppet, or there are times when the client says that we'll give you the environment because they have physical infrastructure. So we tend to give them the requirements. The other bit that we use is we use a program management tool where everybody knows what the other person is working on. So ThoughtWorks has a tool called Mingle, where you can track the progress, and each developer takes responsibility on the cards. Then you have automated testing suites that you can write in. Then you have smoke testing that you can do. So you have Selenium, you have Capybara using with a Firefox driver or Chrome driver. So essentially it becomes everything about, and even building tools. You have build tools like Rake, you have Capistrano, you have MS Build. So there are a lot of tools out there. So when you start thinking about it, you use build tools, you use deployment tools. You can use CM tools like configuration management tools like Chef for deployment as well. You can write up your own scripts for deployment. We don't really use bash scripting as much, because there are better things than bash. You have Ruby scripting available that gives you better feedback than bash does. You have testing tools. Then you divide your testing suite into unit test, into application, into acceptance testing. You divide them into integration testing, and you divide them into final QA manual testing, and then you go ahead with deployment. And you have things like showcases. So basically, it's not just about tools, it's about incorporating all these techniques into your deployment, into your coding.
But like tools you're talking about, like QA and smoke test and all those things, that is a part of, like, can we have some thin, I understand it is a very thin line between the DevOps and the QA and the other parts.
Yeah.
So like, what do you feel like, what actually the DevOps is, what is the role, only the deployment?
No, so till now what I've discussed is you can't say that DevOps is a role per se. Basically, it's about capability building. So I am a DevOps person on a project, so I'm more on, it's a very vague term like a DevOps person, but I'm more into coding for deployment, making deployments automated. Plus, it's about capability building with your developers. So I usually pair with a developer or a lead dev in the team and go through the entire deployment strategies, go through the entire build strategies. If I feel there are a few flaws in the way the devs have written the builds, then you can always convey it and the devs incorporate it and take it up from there. So essentially, when you talk about DevOps consultancy, the role only becomes valid for about a month, where you can enable everybody into using the tools, you make them aware of what they can use, and then you shift to a different team, you shift to different capability building. So a DevOps would not really, it's not just about setting up environments, it's not just about coding for deployments, it's making everybody aware that this is how you do it. So there comes a point where the entire team is not dependent on one person to deploy, the entire team is not dependent on one person to fix a failed deployment. Anybody in the team can update a cookbook, anybody in the team can write up infrastructure as a code. It's just this capability building that is coming in. So that is the culture change that we need. So there are no siloed roles anymore. So that would be DevOps.
It's like creating a chain awareness to the people and
making
the process set, and then
having them use it, and then you move out. Then you just step in when they feel they're lost. When the team feels they're lost, maybe they're unable. If there are times when people are unable to understand how cookbooks are written or Chef could be used. So that's the first month where you make them aware of the DSL, you make them aware of how a cookbook behaves, or how you can configure deployment. Maybe one tool is better than the other, and you discuss on it. So devs and QAs become as much a part of it as the person who's consulting with them. Yes?
Okay, in your department, you use a piece of DevOps tools, right?
Yeah.
How about the governance and security for the entire framework?
Could you repeat that again?
So you have the pieces of tools
Yes.
that you use in the DevOps platform. How about the governance and security concern regarding the entire framework and the tools?
So security is basically, you can say it depends on how secure the client wants. Are you talking about security of the code
Say,
base?
for example, you have a CA, right? You have deploy, you have build, you have all different frameworks and tools.
Yeah.
If you have to configure frameworks for them, how do you control the governance and security part of it?
See, basically the CI tool does, the CI tool is the one that you use.
They're all are independent, right? I mean, Chef is independent tool.
Yeah.
If you consider the CI model, those tools and frameworks are different. So if you have to construct an entire architecture framework to handle between all these build and deploy and infrastructure, how do you consider the governance and security part to integrate it?
So the integration bit comes in that you need to decide where you start. So the devs start coding, of course they start on working on the scripts, but that needs to be deployed. So it's more like a sequential process. In the beginning, you start with the coding, you create an initial deployment script that would need just that bit of code to be deployed, and that script is used in your CI to deploy. Right? You may not have a CI, you may just have a command line deployment script that you just shoot a command in the command line and it will deploy to the particular environment that you want.
I think this question was more related to the entire security framework, as you like say PCI compliance or something like that.
If you are aware of this product called Service Mesh, they have some kind of security and governance module in it.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking, since you are using all independent modules and tools which fits into your DevOps framework, how do you have a governance on the top of that?
Can I try to answer?
I know. If someone else can answer this, I don't think I'm getting the question
See,
properly.
DevOps should not matter to him. Here the process starts. He checks in, goes into Git, Mercurial, whatever system you have, and then it picked up by your CI tools. It's you and your team's trust. What kind of securities you put on these every tools. If I have trust on my team that they will check in with the proper number of Jira ID or whatever, I don't need hooks. Else, I can impose it with hooks on SCM side. Now comes the CI part. I can impose it with authentications on matrices based on configurations, build, deletes, every damn thing. So it's purely as a process, team to team basis changes. If you have trust with your team, if you know your team is educated, you just give them trainings and it's done. Otherwise, you impose it with the settings or the plugins or the configurations tools again itself on the team. So they don't cross their boundaries.
So ThoughtWorks doesn't have any frameworks on the top of it.
ThoughtWorks.
Yes, framework.
If you guys have any kind of governance and security framework from top to bottom approach on the top of all these tools, because if you see all these tools are independent,
Yes.
they might be, say, for example, infrastructure to build and after build, deploy. You have a framework, but how do you control the top of that? Do you guys have any framework on the top of it?
No, not as of now. Basically, it's just the way, the most optimum use of these tools that you figure that works with the project, because because there are multiple tools in it, right? There are times when you're working with a Java project and you may want to deploy it using Maven. So a framework like that, maybe then it totally depends on how you look at it. So you have the set process that you do, like you build, you code, you build, you deploy. Now what you use as a build tool is completely your choice. There might be build tools that are more suited to your environment, or for a simple reason, like the devs don't want to go ahead or go away from Ruby. They just want to stick to Ruby because they're coding in Ruby. It's easier for them to code into for a Ruby build or Ruby deploy sort of script. So it depends on you. You may never have it depends that there are times you may not even have a tool. Like you would just want to write up a script on your own. So it depends on the devs. It totally depends on the team, how they view which is the best way to have everybody compliant to that level. And about the Git commits, the governance that you're talking about, there is one. I'll come back to you. Usually at the beginning of the project, people decide on how to set up their commits. Maybe have the story number, the name of the pair, and then because the moment you commit, your name will come up in the bit bucket or whatever SCM you're using, your pair name, and then either you write the name of the story if you've completed it, or you write the major chunk of work that you've done. There might be multiple things that you've done in that commit, but the major bit that you did. So that comes in. So basically, that is exactly what the cultural change is about, that the devs are now more aware of how to make what they're doing visible to everybody else. It's not just about them, it's about the entire team needs to figure what this particular guy did. And it becomes easier for program management also, or the team lead to also figure what has been the progress of my team. If the team lead comes in the morning and does a Git log, he'll be able to see what has happened in the past day. He'll be able to figure out where we are, and he'll be able to figure out if someone is stuck somewhere, or if there is something that is gone, that is not the way it should be. So it becomes easier for them to architect it as well.
Since you have been doing this,
We can take these offline because we're running out of time. Or maybe I can take just one. Which one? Or
Sure, so like actually whatever questions are there, automating security and automation, we can discuss them in open space. We'll have them.
yeah.
Or like during lunch.
For security, you can contact him. He's the IPsec guy. Yeah, really.
Like we are anyway running later on.
I had only one question.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not related to framework or security.
Okay.
Don't worry. Not related. Since you are a DevOps consultant and you have been doing a lot of consulting for the DevOps, how much emphasis do you put on CMDB? And do you use any open source or free tool for CMDB?
The only one time that I used CMDB was in my previous organization when we were handling Windows boxes. Why we don't use CMDB is because your entire infrastructure is coded. So what configuration you really want to manage is there, right there in your code.
There are some compliance, like most of the Fortune 500 companies, they are compliant, which will come daily.
I haven't faced that problem, but I've used the CMDB and I understand what you're talking about. It also depends on the client if they're interested in having a CMDB, because there are times when it also depends on the.
It's not only it's not only a basic spreadsheet. I'm asking about the relationship between different components. So CMDB is all about the relationship between different CIs. So do you have any tool
No. We haven't used anything like that. We just depend on our configuration management tool, either Chef or Puppet.
But they are not actually CMDB tools.
They're not CMDB tools, but you can always derive from it. So essentially, once the environment is built, it really, we've seen that the clients don't go back to it. They only go back to it when there's an upgrade required. And that upgrade may just be a small upgrade on the package, or it may be an upgrade on some security patches or something. But the relationship, we could probably put it out on a presentation and give it to them, and they can keep updating it. But essentially, coding infrastructure actually reduces the bit where you need CMDB, because Using a configuration management tool will also give you the capability to query those nodes to actually understand what those nodes are doing, what roles are applied to it, what you can say how it interacts with the other node as well. So
that is very basic because
I think at this point we'll need to
Okay.
offline.
yeah.
thanks everyone.